Don't you dare hand him to the law. The voice came out of the dark as Elias Creed lifted the latch. A bundle lay on his porch, wrapped in a blue blanket. Beyond it, a woman sagged against the cedar post, one hand pressed to her side, a revolver loose in the other. Blood dripped onto his boards. The baby let out one sharp cry, thin as a hawk's whistle. The dawn smelled of rain and iron. Elias looked from the child to the woman and felt the cold change inside him. Lantern light shook over the blanket, and he saw the stitched swallow near one corner, wings spread in faded red thread. He knew it at once. His dead wife had sewn it. The woman straightened enough to lift the revolver. If Hollisbell gets him, she said, voice fraying, he'll finish what he started. Then her knees buckled. Elias caught her before her head struck the boards. She was young, dust-caked, and gray with blood loss. The baby kicked under the blanket. Beyond the cottonwoods, hooves sounded on hard earth. Not many, but coming. He swore, hauled the woman inside, then scooped up the bundle. The baby smelled of milk, smoke, and horse sweat. Under the wool, his little body shivered against Elias's forearm. The house groaned around them, while a loose chain tapped the porch post like a slow clock. Elias barred the door. He laid the woman on the table and pulled back her hand. The bullet had torn through the flesh above her hip. Bad, but maybe not mortal if the bleeding slowed. He glanced at the child again. Wide, dark eyes blinked from the folds of the blanket. Damn you, Elias muttered, though he did not know if he meant the woman, the sheriff, or God. He fetched whiskey, bandages, and the cleanest towel he owned. The baby had begun to fuss again, and Elias moved like a man handling dynamite. He poured whiskey past the woman's lips and pressed cloth to the wound. Blood still soaked through, hot on his hands. The baby cried harder. All right, Elias snapped, as if the child had insulted him. He picked him up, one big hand spread across the tiny back. The crying stopped at once. Elias stood in the kitchen with a stranger's blood drying on his wrists and the child against his shoulder. The baby's breath warmed his neck. Then his gaze dropped to the blanket again. The swallow was there, yes, but so was something else. A row of tiny black stitches inside the border, too regular for mending, almost hidden in the blue wool. He rubbed them with his thumb. Hard little knots. Deliberate. A message, maybe, or something sewn into the hem. Hoofbeats came louder now. Elias crossed to the back room, set the baby in the old wooden cradle he had never burned and never used again, and covered him with his coat. Then he blew out the front lamp, leaving only the stove glow, and stepped to the window with the Sharp's rifle he kept near the flour bin. 3 riders moved along the fence line, dark against the paling east. Not racing. Searching. One of them wore a flat-crowned hat Elias knew too well. Sheriff Hollisbell did not ride before dawn unless he meant trouble. The wounded woman's eyes fluttered. Please, she whispered. Elias did not turn. Who are you? Her breathing hitched. Ivy. That all. Ivy Calder. The name struck like a hammer on old bone. Years ago, Nathan Calder, a surveyor with a homestead in Juniper Hollow, was accused by Bell of stealing silver ore and forging lines. By sunrise, Calder was dead, his cabin burned, and his wife Rose had vanished with their infant daughter into rain-swollen dark. Anna had cried when she heard. Elias had said nothing, because silence had been easier than admitting Hollisbell's story smelled like a lie. Now a woman with Rose Calder's eyes bled on his table with Anna's blanket around her child. The riders stopped in the yard. A fist hammered the door. Creed, Bell called. You awake in there? Elias rested the rifle barrel on the sill. He could smell horse leather and the sheriff's cheroot through the cracks. The baby made a small sound in the back room. Bell knocked again, harder. Had word a wounded thief came this way. Woman stole county property and shot a deputy. Open up. Ivy tried to rise. Elias put a hand on her shoulder and kept her down. You move, he said quietly. You bleed out. Her fingers closed around his wrist with surprising strength. The blanket, she whispered. He doesn't know all of it. Don't let him take the blanket. Bell's voice sharpened. Creed, I won't ask a third time. Elias stared at the door while the house settled around him. 15 years of keeping to himself had bought him silence and land. Opening that door could keep them. Keeping it shut would cost them. Behind him, the baby began to cry. On the other side of the wood, Hollisbell went quiet. And in that sudden stillness, Elias understood the choice had already reached his porch with the child. Elias carried the cradle into the root cellar. Potato earth and cold stone filled the air. He laid the child behind flour sacks, wrapped him tighter, and climbed back up with his jaw clenched. When he opened the door, Bell stood with 2 deputies in the ash-blue morning. His horse steamed. The sheriff's pale eyes slipped past Elias at once, measuring shadows. "Trouble early," Bell said. "You usually bring it." One deputy laughed, then swallowed it. Bell stepped onto the porch. Woman came through town after midnight. Stole papers from the county office. Put a bullet in Tom Rusk. Last seen heading west. His gaze settled on the blood on Elias's cuff. "Looks like butchering indoors. Cut my hand on the stove hinge." Bell stared at him. "Mind if we look around?" Elias felt the house behind him holding its breath. Ivy lay half-conscious on his table. The child was one cry from ruin. He could step aside and keep his peace, or lie to the law and burn his good name. He planted his boots. "Yeah, I'm mine." The porch boards seemed to tighten under all of them. Bell smiled, but no warmth reached it. "Since when?" "Since before sunrise. Come back with paper signed by a judge. This county elected me the paper. Then I reckon this porch just became a courtroom." For a moment, only the horses moved. Bell looked over Elias's shoulder, then back. "You've been alone too long, Creed," he said softly. "Makes a man foolish. Or careful." Bell's expression flattened. "If that thief enters your house and you hide her, you answer for it." Elias kept one hand near the rifle propped behind the door. "Then I'll answer if it comes." Bell nodded. "Get your horse ready. I may need every able man afternoon." He reined back once. "If you hear a baby crying where no baby ought to be, remember some burdens ain't meant to be yours." When they rode off, Elias shut the door slow and hard. Ivy had dragged herself upright by the table edge. Sweat glazed her face. He heard him, not clearly. "Then we've got time." "We?" Elias tore cloth with his teeth. "You brought death to my porch. Don't start speaking like partners." Her eyes flashed. "If I wanted you dead, I'd have let Bell find me in your yard." He cleaned the wound while she bit her knuckles. When it was bound enough, he saddled his mule and rode for Clara Reyes. If Bell watched, so be it. The truth had already crossed his threshold. Clara met him outside her surgery, sleeves rolled and hair pinned with a pencil. The morning smelled of soap and coal smoke. "If you're bleeding, take a number," she said. Then she saw his face. "Who's hurt?" "A woman. Shot. And a baby." Clara blinked once. "Yours?" "No. That almost makes it worse." She grabbed her bag, locked up, and climbed behind him without another word. Back at the house, she moved fast, cleaning the wound and testing Ivy's pulse. The baby cried until Clara lifted him, then quieted. She examined the blanket too, fingers lingering over the black knots. "These aren't repairs," she murmured. That's what she said. Ivy opened her eyes. "It's the only proof my mother had left." Clara looked at Elias. "You know her?" "I know it." Ivy swallowed. "Rose Calder was my mother. She told me if trouble found me, I had to bring my son here." Elias stared at her. "Why?" "Because once, when you still had a conscience, you spared her." The words hit like dust in an open wound. He remembered rain, Bell shouting in the wash, a woman on a mare clutching a child, and his rifle sight wavering high on purpose. It had not saved anyone. Clara studied him with that doctor's gaze that seemed to strip skin from excuses. "What aren't you telling me?" Elias reached for the stove poker. "Bell went after the Calders for land, not law. Nathan found silver in Juniper Hollow. Bell and Vernon Pike wanted the claim. Nathan died. Rose fled with her baby. And you helped." Clara asked. "Not enough." Ivy touched the blanket. "My mother kept this because your wife hid something in it after we escaped." Elias looked up sharply. "Anna." She never said what. Only that if Bell ever came for us again, the blanket would speak where she could not. Clara's mouth tightened. "Then Bell isn't chasing a thief. He's chasing a secret." A church bell rang from town square. Then a crier's voice, faint in the wind. Elias stepped onto the porch and saw a rider pinning notices by the mercantile. Even at a distance, he recognized Bell's deputy. By noon, every soul in Mercy Crossing would know a wanted woman was loose with stolen papers, a wounded deputy on her conscience, and reward money. He looked back at Clara holding the baby, at Ivy on the pillow, at the blue blanket with Anna Swallow. The safe choice had already passed. "Clara," he said, reaching for his saddle gun. "Pack enough for the road." Outside, east of the house, came the low thunder of many hooves. By the time the sun cleared the ridge, the world had gone copper and sharp. Elias saddled his best gelding, lashed on a waterskin, and listened to riders gathering in town. Each hoofstroke seemed to hit inside his ribs. Ivy could barely stand, but stand she did. Clara bound her tighter, handed her a swallow of laudanum, and said, "You fall, I drag you. You slow us, I curse you. But I do not leave patience behind." A weak smile ghosted across Ivy's face. "You talk like a saint with a pistol. I talk like a tired woman in a cruel county." They went out through the back pasture where sage brushed their stirrups. Elias rode point, scanning the washes. The baby slept against Clara's chest in a sling. The blue blanket lay across him, its hidden knots pressing their mystery deeper each mile. At the mouth of Dry Widow Gulch, Elias raised a fist. Dust moved on the southern rise. "Riders," he said. Bell's men spread wide, trying to turn them. Sun flashed on one rifle barrel, then another. A hawk wheeled overhead, crying like rusty hinges. "Into the gulch," Elias said. They dropped between walls of red stone where shade smelled of alkali. Hoofbeats boomed there. Ivy swayed in the saddle, one hand clamped on the horn. "Why Juniper Hollow?" Elias called back. "Because the blanket only tells the truth when it's wet," she said. He half turned. "What?" "My mother stitched ash thread under the wool. Water darkens it. Shows lines." Ivy swallowed against pain. "The map leads to what Bell killed for." A shot cracked above them. Stone chips burst near Elias's shoulder. He spurred harder. They burst from the gulch into a broad wash. Ahead stood San Geronimo Chapel, abandoned, its bell tower split by lightning. Ivy pointed with a shaking hand. "There, beneath the chapel floor. Mother hid the box there after the fire." Another shot. Clara's mare screamed and stumbled, blood suddenly bright on its flank. Clara clutched the baby and leaped free just before the horse crashed into the sand. Dust swallowed her. Elias wheeled back. Bell's posse poured from the gulch behind them, 6 riders now, hard and fast. "Take the baby," Clara shouted, shoving the sling toward him. "I can still run." Elias reached for the child, then saw Ivy sliding from her saddle 10 yards farther on, her bad side folding under her. He had one clean heartbeat to choose. Save the baby and trust Clara alone. Or go to Ivy and risk Bell taking them all. He drove his horse toward Ivy. Later he would not know if that was courage, guilt, or the oldest wound in him answering at last. He dragged her upright, threw her across the saddle, and slapped the gelding toward the chapel where Clara had already vanished with the child. Bullets hummed past. One tore Elias's hat off. Another struck his horse, but the animal kept going. They reached the chapel steps in a storm of grit. Inside, the air turned cool and smelled of bat droppings, candle wax long gone to dust, and old stone. Light speared through cracks in the roof. From the chapel rafters, pigeons burst upward in a storm of wings, their panic beating dust loose as if the whole ruin knew blood was coming. Clara knelt behind the altar, baby in her arms, revolver steady despite the blood on her skirt. "Bar the door," she said. Elias shoved a fallen pew against it just as riders thundered outside. Bell's voice rang through the nave. "You're cornered, Creed. Hand over the woman, the child, and whatever she stole. I may let the rest of you live." Ivy laughed once, harsh and thin. "There's the mercy of Hollis Bell." Clara wet the blanket with water from the skin. Slowly, like bruises rising through skin, dark lines appeared beneath the blue weave. Not mending, not decoration. A map, curving ridge marks, a spring symbol, and near the corner swallow, a cross stitched in nearly invisible thread. "There," Ivy whispered, pointing to the chapel floor before the altar. Elias ripped at warped planks with the pew leg. Dust and splinters filled his mouth. Beneath the third board lay a narrow iron box, and, folded on top of it, something small wrapped in oilcloth. Bell must have seen through a crack, because his tone changed. "Creed, listen carefully. That box won't save you. Open it, and you'll understand how many graves sit behind that blanket." Elias ignored him and tore open the oilcloth first. Inside was a photograph, browned at the edges. Anna sat in a chair he recognized from their old kitchen, younger than memory, tired-eyed but smiling. In her arms lay a dark-haired infant wrapped in the same blue blanket. On the back, in Anna's hand, were 6 words. "Rose's girl. If needed, tell Elias." His throat closed. The baby on Clara's lap whimpered. Outside, Belle's bootsteps climbed the chapel stairs. Then another voice rose with his, one Elias had not expected. Deputy Tom Rusk. Alive. Not shot dead after all. Burn them out, Rusk called. The first bottle shattered against the chapel wall, and the smell of lamp oil rushed in under the door. The fire caught fast in the dry summer grass outside, crackling low at first, then louder as wind pressed it along the chapel steps. Smoke slipped through the gaps in the door and turned the light gray. The baby began to fuss, his face reddening, small hands beating the air. Clara rocked him once, firm and calm. He smells fear, she said. So do I, Ivy whispered. Elias pried open the iron box. Inside lay a ledger, 2 deeds, silver buttons, and a sealed letter in Anna's hand. For a second, he could only stare. 15 years vanished, and he was back in their kitchen watching her bend over needlework, while she said a decent man owed the truth more than comfort. Clara touched his shoulder. Read it. He broke the seal with hands that suddenly did not feel like his own. Elias, if this reaches you, trouble found the Calders again. Rose came to me after Nathan was killed with the true survey and Belle's ledger. Hollis would have hanged her by dawn. I stitched the map into the blanket because cloth travels where paper gets searched. You let her pass once, though Hollis ordered otherwise. Do not let that be the bravest thing you ever do. Anna. By the end, the ink blurred. Elias did not know whether smoke or grief had done it. Ivy wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand. My mother said your wife saved us twice. Once with a cradle, once with a needle. Outside, Belle shouted for more oil. Clara scanned the deeds. These show Pike forged tax liens, and Belle seized the valley under false debt. She opened the ledger next. Names, payments, burned fences, stolen cattle, and one line beside Nathan Calder's name marked final. This can hang them both. Only if we live long enough to show it, Elias said. Ivy shifted, biting back a groan. There's a tunnel. Priests used it during raids. My mother hid here once and told me if I ever came back, I should look behind the saint with the broken hands. Elias crossed to the cracked plaster statue in the alcove. Behind it, under fallen stone, he found a narrow opening choked with dust. Cool air breathed from it, smelling of clay and hidden water. Before moving, Clara caught his sleeve. Wait. He turned. Her face, streaked with soot, had gone unexpectedly soft. Why did you really help them that night? She asked. The chapel popped as a beam outside caught flame. Elias looked at the baby, at Ivy against the wall, at Anna's letter in his hand. Because Rose was carrying a child, he said. Because Anna was carrying ours. For 1 second I saw what Belle would turn me into. He swallowed. Then I still let him bury the truth. Clara's eyes glistened, but held steady. Silence never protects. It only picks a side. No accusation could have cut cleaner. He nodded once. Then I'm done with it. The tunnel forced them close. Elias carried the iron box and cleared rubble. Clara came behind with the baby under her chin. Ivy followed last, dragging one leg. The passage scraped shoulders and stole sound except for breathing and the muffled roar of fire above. At the far end they emerged into a cleft behind the chapel hill, where juniper cast a strip of shade over a trickling spring. The water smelled of limestone and living earth. Wind moved through the needles with a sound like whispered prayer. For the first time, nobody was shooting. Clara knelt to wet a cloth and clean Ivy's face. Elias took the baby while she worked. The boy blinked up at him, solemn as a judge. Sunlight touched the child's lashes and turned them gold. He's heavier than he looks, Elias said. That is how trouble hides, Clara replied. A weak laugh escaped Ivy. Then her face grew serious. His name is Daniel. After my father. She drew out a small silver thimble. Mother kept this too, said Anna dropped it while sewing that blanket. Elias closed his fist around the thimble. It warmed slowly against his palm. Such a little thing. Such a sharp little mercy to survive all these years. Clara bandaged his horse's wound as best she could, then looked toward the ridge. Smoke rose beyond it in a dirty plume. Belle will figure out the tunnel, she said. He'll come around by the spring. Elias tucked the letter back into his shirt. Good. Let him. Ivy studied him. You planning to kill him? He looked down at Daniel, at the blue blanket that had carried lies and hope through 15 years of fear. No, he said. I'm done obeying the kind of man who makes killing seem like the only answer. Clara met his gaze. Something steadier settled there. Trust. Then from above came the clatter of stones and Belle's voice. close now, cold as a blade. I know you're in there, Creed. Bring me the child, and maybe I let the women walk. Elias handed Daniel back to Clara, stood, and checked the loads in his rifle. Dawn had found him hiding strangers in his house. By sunset, he meant to walk into the open as a different man. Bell came down the trail with Tom Rusk and 3 riders behind him. Smoke smeared the sheriff's coat, but his pistol hand stayed easy. Vernon Pike wheezed behind a shotgun. The spring trickled between stone shelves at the bottom of the cut. There was only scrub, rock, and hard white light. Elias stepped out. Clara and Ivy stayed hidden behind with Daniel. Bell stopped 10 paces away. I knew Anna told you more than she should have. Elias kept the rifle low. You knew because you killed for it. Pike spat into the dust. That valley was wasted on settlers who couldn't work it. From behind the rocks, Ivy's voice rang clear. My father worked it fine till you shot him in the back. Rusk jerked toward the sound. Bell lifted one hand. You always had too much sentiment, Creed, the sheriff said. That's why you were never fit for power. Power, Elias answered. You burned homes for a silver seam. For order, Bell snapped, and for the first time his temper showed through. For a county men feared enough to obey. The words rolled off the stone walls and came back uglier. Townspeople lined the ridge above them. 2 drovers, old Mrs. Cates, Reverend Sloan. Smoke from the chapel had summoned them. Faces peered down through the haze. Bell saw them too and realized, a beat too late, that witnesses had arrived. Clara rose from cover with the ledger and Daniel. You want order? She called. Here is the book you kept it with. Names, payments, fires, killings. Any man who still rides for Hollis Bell rides as a murderer. Pike lunged. Shoot her. Rusk raised his revolver. Elias fired first. The shot clipped Rusk's wrist and spun the gun into the spring. Pike snatched Daniel from Clara and stumbled backward with the baby against his chest like a shield. Everything narrowed. Clara screamed Pike's name. Ivy tried to rise and nearly fell. Bell swung his pistol toward Elias, but Elias did not aim at Bell. He went for the child. He hit Pike low and hard. They crashed into the shallow water. Daniel wailed. Pike cracked the shotgun stock across Elias's shoulder, but Elias kept one arm around the baby and drove a fist into Pike's throat. Bell fired. The bullet missed Elias and struck Pike high in the chest. Pike stared at the red blooming across his vest. Then his grip slackened. Elias tore Daniel free and rolled behind the stone shelf as another shot shattered rock. Damn you, Bell roared, whether at Pike, Elias, or fate itself. Then Ivy stood up in full view, blood on her skirt, pistol trembling in both hands. No, she said. Damn you. Bell turned toward her. That was enough. Clara flung the ledger to the ridge where Reverend Sloan caught it. At once the drovers began shouting as pages spilled open in the wind. My name's there, look. He paid men to burn the Ortega fence. Nathan called her, Lord have mercy. The truth, once loosed, moved faster than bullets. Bell's riders shifted in the trail above. One backed his horse away. Another removed his hat. Rusk, clutching his shattered wrist, sank to his knees and did not reach for another gun. Bell saw his world break apart around him and chose the only thing left to men like him. He lunged for Daniel. Elias came up from behind the stone shelf, caught Bell's coat, and drove him against the wall of the cut. Bell's pistol went off between them. Bell slammed an elbow into his ribs. Elias answered with the rifle, but across Bell's jaw. The sheriff dropped to one knee, blood in his mustache. You think this makes you clean? He rasped. Elias leveled the rifle at his chest. All around them the canyon held still. Water over stone. Daniel crying. The townspeople waited above. One pull. That was all. After 15 years of silence, one pull could end Bell forever. Instead, Elias lowered the barrel. No, he said. It makes me finished with you. Bell went for the hidden knife in his boot. Ivy fired. The shot echoed once, then rolled away into the juniper hills. Bell sagged against the rock and slid into the spring water, staring at nothing. The knife fell from his hand. No one moved for a long breath. Clara took Daniel from Elias and pressed her forehead briefly to his bruised shoulder. It was not a kiss. It was something steadier. By sunset, Pike was in irons. Rusk had confessed, and Juniper Hollow belonged again to Ivy and her son. Weeks later, fresh boards replaced the scorched ones on Elias's porch. Clara came often. Daniel laughed at horses and grabbed Elias's finger. Ivy waited for her valley cabin to be rebuilt and sometimes spread the blue blanket across her knees. When autumn reached Mercy Crossing, Elias carved 2 names into the porch beam: Anna, for the truth that returned, and Daniel, for the life it saved. Clara watched below, eyes warm in the gold light. The wind smelled of cedar. Years later, travelers still saw the blue blanket in the sun, a boy racing through the dust, a woman laughing by the gate, and Elias in the doorway, unafraid.